Good afternoon and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, the 7 Essential Traits of a Resilient Growth Strategy, sponsored by the MEP National Network, and the MEP is, of course, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. My name is Jill Jusko, and I'm Associate Content Director with Industry Week. Before we begin, I'd like to explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First, if at any time you're having audio difficulties or slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. And if you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the Maximize icon or by dragging the lower right corner to enlarge the window. And we welcome your questions during today's event. To submit your questions to today's presenters, simply type your question into the Q&A window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We will be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we will add them to the queue. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on the Industry Week website within the next week for you to review, and you will be notified by email when that archive is available. On your console, the MEP National Network logo is hot linked. If you'd like to visit their website during the webcast, you can simply click on the logo and a new window will open, and this will not take you out of the webinar. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce today's speakers. Joining us are Chris Scafario. Chris is the Vice President of Consulting Operations at the Delaware Valley Industrial Resource Center, DVIRC. He works in Philadelphia and across the MEP National Network to support the advancement of small to medium-sized manufacturers and their supply chain through leading the design, implementation, and oversight of consulting services in areas related to operational excellence, top-line growth, and business management. Joining Chris today is Sylvia Wauer. Sylvia is the Vice President of Research and Strategic Growth at the Delaware Valley Industrial Resource Center, where she manages the company's market development department, including market research, market scouting, and lead generation. While working at DVIRC, Sylvia has successfully managed the execution of more than 200 market development consulting projects for a variety of sectors in the manufacturing industry. And with that, Chris and Sylvia, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you everyone in the audience for spending a little bit of time with us today. We're excited to present the 7 essential traits of a resilient growth strategy. And I think the background that Sylvia and I have as your presenters hopefully lends itself well to accreditate some of these traits. Together, Sylvia and I have been working on building these growth services for small and mid-sized manufacturers really across the country through the MEP network and in some cases around the world for over a decade. When you look at the amount of project works our team as a whole has delivered, we're upwards of 900 projects. Sylvia and I have had the great pleasure of building a team of over 20 people that are really uniquely suited to deliver project work to help manufacturers grow. We work in areas of market research, lead generation, digital marketing and branding, tech scouting, and overall growth strategy. So, in our years working together, building our team, meeting a lot of really amazing people, I'm really happy and enthused to share with you that we have seen resiliency in action. And it's been really an absolute delight to see and experience. If we're going to start our conversation today around these, traits of a resilient growth strategy, I thought it's important just to kind of take a look at the old Webster Dictionary kind of definition of what does it really mean to be resilient? And ultimately, the definition is about to become strong or healthy or successfully recovered after, experiencing something bad or adversity. And, you know, it doesn't take a vivid imagination to come up with the adversity. You know, the definition of 2020's adversity, I think we'd all agree, the top of mind consideration would be the COVID virus, the pandemic that has really impacted us as a nation and as individuals and business people in ways that we probably would have never imagined this time last year. It is something that has really taken a lot of us by surprise, but I'm really happy to say that in our travels since the late spring, we've seen resiliency in our manufacturing base. We've seen people rise to new challenges and get excited around trying to make the most of a really trying situation. So with that, the truth of the matter is I started thinking about the whole background behind this conversation. What does it mean to be resilient? What does it mean to be reactive or adaptive as a manufacturer? I started to think about the need for this dialogue last year, and the background is really kind of interesting. The background for this whole thought process came up when we were shopping for a new family car. One of our friends works in the automobile industry, and he was really excited one Thursday afternoon to drop off a new vehicle that he thought would be perfect for the family kind of transportation. And it was this really brand new at the time electric Audi. And the opportunity for us was simple: enjoy it for the weekend, give us some feedback, let us know what you think. And truth be told, it was a brand new experience for us as a family. We were not thinking about an electric vehicle, and it was the first time behind the wheel. And when you work with so many different suppliers to the automotive industry, it was something unique to experience. And the conventional things, it was interesting from a comfort and acceleration perspective, new technology, all that great stuff, and we got to enjoy the benefits of that cool synthetic sound, and it was something truly stimulating for us. But it wasn't long into this trial of this new electric vehicle that you started to realize what a tremendous disruption it was, this new vehicle was, to the way things were in the automotive supply chain. So what do I really mean by that? Think about all the fossil fuel burning vehicles that are out there on the road today, and their systems and their components, and really all of the programs and platforms that are out there that require parts from a global web of automotive suppliers. Now, think for a minute just about what level of disruption occurs when you take that internal combustion motor away from the common, vehicle, the common automobile, and you look at the changes that occur in these new electric vehicle platforms. And you start to consider, the need for resiliency amongst so many different links in the supply chain, not just, the OEM part suppliers, but you're feeling disruption in the third tier and beyond of the automotive supply chain. And that disruption, although it's not a pandemic, can be really intimidating for some of the smaller and mid-sized manufacturers and suppliers into the automotive industry. And that disruption requires the same kind of response that a response to an economic downturn would trigger. So when I bring this up, I want everybody to think about their organizations and realize that, today we have headwinds. Tomorrow might be brighter, but a week from now we might experience different kinds and unanticipated headwinds. So we really want to focus on contingency and continuity planning, always having some new irons on the fire. Because manufacturers have struggled over the years with this whole concept of innovation, ideation, marketing, and sales. And I'll let Sylvia, my colleague, talk to you a little bit about some of the data that we have to back this line of thinking up.
Thank you, Chris. As Chris had mentioned, sales and marketing have been on top of manufacturers, one of the most major challenges for over 2 decades, according to the Georgia Tech study. The major reason for that is that too many firms don't budget or plan for what goes into growth strategy. On the next figure, you will see the evidence that is generated by Deloitte that places manufacturing sector at the bottom of ranking within marketing budget by industry. Chris?
So we want to use our time today to kind of encourage disruptive thinking and walk through these traits. And one of the first traits, and I would argue it's quite possibly the most important trait for you to consider as you plan your growth as an organization, is to focus on astute situational awareness. So what do I mean by that? It's more than just a few fancy words bundled together. In our travels, we've seen too many manufacturers that have been oblivious to those changes in platforms or shifts in technology, and an equal group of manufacturers that have just gotten frozen because they don't have the energy or the understanding internally as to how to respond or adapt. So the astute situational awareness that we're talking about today quite simply means, as a business leader, try to be aware, alert, and engaged to the changing conditions that exist in the markets and the market segments that you service. Even if it's just kind of conducting regular dialogues with your customers and your supply chains to see where things are going, we want to encourage this constant awareness levels of what's next in your business and in your opportunity, so you're not caught blindsided or frozen out of just a shock and inability to respond. One of the stories that I picked kind of help walk us through this whole line of thinking, this whole narrative, centers on a client that we've worked with for the last 8 years. They're a 75-year-old business that for the first 60-some years earned their stripes selling steel filing cabinets. We happened to meet this business at the time when a new owner came in and wanted to kind of pursue a course of innovation. And one of the first things in our first conversation that I heard was, we don't want to make products that people are trying to get rid of. And if you think about steel filing cabinets, there's plenty of homes and businesses that just want to get rid of them because everything's going digital. And that was the line of thinking in our client's headset, that wanted to pursue this course of innovation and change. So we realized that we had some organizational assets, and we needed to try to start somewhere by mapping them out and finding, what true north was for growth. And we turned to a tool that is very common within the Navy's Top Gun School of fighter pilots. And it was developed by a fellow by the name of Colonel John Boyd. I encourage you to research Colonel Boyd, read as much as you can about him. He's a fascinating individual. And he basically invented what's known as the OODA loop. And it's this rapid-fire analysis scenario where in the case of fighter pilots, every 30 seconds they're going through this sequence of observing, the combat environment, orienting themselves to a series of potential actions that could be taken, and prioritizing the action that's going to trigger the best possible outcome, and then deciding on which outcome to take to drive continued success or sustenance in the case of a battle. In which case, the observe, orient, decide, and act is this ongoing way of thinking of driving your situational awareness. We plugged it into the case of this filing cabinet company that had brilliant distribution assets, strong brand awareness, and a real passion to expand into one key market. So when we started to build our plan out, when we started to define our growth strategy, we looked at the conventional tools that were available to kind of prioritize a direction. We used one tool that was known as an Ansoff matrix. And I'll just remind the group that we've tried to put together a workbook that takes everything that we'll be talking about here today and makes it really simple and easy for you to understand and hopefully work with as you leave this webinar and go off to design your own growth plan. So download the workbook and hopefully use it, and hopefully start with the use of this Ansoff matrix, because it will get you thinking around, where are my pools of opportunity in terms of growth? For a filing cabinet manufacturer, we realized that partial market diversification was the way to go, in particular because they had such a strong presence and sales network within supplying the K through 12 and university network. So we were talking about academia. And what we eventually landed on was this pathway towards outfitting K through 12 classrooms across the country with 21st century STEM-related educational environments, from desks to lecterns to smartboards, the whole 9 yards. The business has been on this beautiful trajectory of reinventing themselves and rebranding and designing these learning environments that have helped really take a business on the verge of insolvency and put them on a rocket course towards growth. They've built a better version of the business that they once were. And I can promise you, what worked here can work for any business that feels adversity. It just takes time and it takes structure to develop the products and services that your markets want and need and ultimately will trust you as a world-class provider of. It also takes consistency. So just like any kind of continuous improvement initiative, you need to be able to have a process, stick to it, and keep going. It takes time for these initiatives to take root and make a difference. From this point on in our conversation today, I think a lot of what we'll go through will go on to support this notion of you need to be continually improving and driving change within the business. And that's the role that situational awareness will come in and help guide you in, so that you're not just facing any kind of sales plateau or stagnation. You're always looking for what's new and what's the next best practice for you to truly be a standout provider in your marketplace. So moving right along into the second trait, and again, I hope it's supported by this version of situational awareness. You want to be able to leverage your organizational competencies, your core competencies. Why do people buy from you versus any number of alternate suppliers that might be out there? When I look at all the different projects we worked on, I can kind of look back and smile when I think of this one client that is based out of New England. The manufacturer's roots go all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. The business started as a manufacturer of cotton gins way back when, and it kept on going and growing strong into the 1930s when they actually invented and patented the coil cord that you'll see on virtually any phone at any office or in any phone across the world. And over time, the business, although it was profitable and grew year over year, became kind of stagnant, and they lost that path or passion for innovation. And by the mid-2000s, they were what I would argue as a large but very conventional contract manufacturer of wiring harnesses. So when the next generation of family management took over, there was a passion internally to reboot and recapture the spirit of innovation that was once at the heart of this organization. But there was a lot of history of perspectives and a lot of really senior people that didn't want to change the way things were. And the really good news was that the leadership believed that everyone had a seat at the table, and everybody should have a good perspective, and their voice should be heard. But the challenge was everybody was trying to, when we first walked in, try to talk over each other. So what we found was a great coming together tool was something as simple and basic as a SWOT analysis. Looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats together as a team and talking through them is a great way to assess, what's working and what's not working in your business. But it also gives you a structure to have a critical dialogue with diverse members of your team and provides a very important and structured format to talk through your innovations and your ideation sequences so that you can really put structure around your strategy. And through this process, it was really an amazing experience. Going through this process, by the end of the day, it became so clear that there were different and really exciting directions and strengths that the company could pursue. But it was almost unanimous that, this is just us talking amongst people that have worked in this business and know this business. We want to hear from our customers and our suppliers. What else could we be doing or should we be doing? It was an external kind of perspective that we realized, quite frankly, was needed to drive, the next generation of growth in the business. So not long after this first kickoff conversation, it became overtly clear there were some clients out there that this contract manufacturer was servicing really well, and there was a high degree of trust. Talking to them first and understanding, what are the projects or the products that are keeping up those engineers, those clients' engineers up at night? Where are they experiencing failure, and how could this really good contract manufacturer help them? Shortly after this kind of endeavor into talking with different folks, it was made clear that there was an opportunity to build a better connector and, believe it or not, coil cord for lapel mics in the first responder community that would basically take and make a communications device better and less prone to failure in extreme environments. It was abundantly clear this was something that this manufacturer could do and do very well. They ultimately came up with their own patented product, and I'll tell you, this opportunity to solve a problem and design a better mousetrap crushed obsolete paradigms within the organization that they were just a contract manufacturer and built to spec. They shifted almost overnight to the fact they were problem solvers and they were really good at it. So, when you think about your organization, especially if you've always looked at yourself as someone that sells time and builds to spec, search deeper and look at, what can we do as a business to solve people's problems? How can we leverage our strengths to build this culture of relentless innovation and problem solving so people come to you first? That first phone call when there's a challenge or a problem. That typically leads to, irreplaceable supply chain relationships when you're able to provide that kind of value. And for our good friends in the New England market, they were able to leverage those successes into a whole host of other successes, none the least of which were to supply into the electric vehicle markets and their quick charging stations throughout the country. So, it was a case where growth led to more growth. Moving right along into our third trait of resiliency in a growth strategy. We want your organization, your growth strategy, to be as unique as who you are. Don't try to pursue the path of being a copycat. Try to build a growth strategy, a growth plan that's as unique as your business. Just recently, within the last 4 months, we had a really amazing opportunity to connect with a manufacturer out in the Midwest that was one of the leading suppliers of party tent rentals, basically party tents, into the rental and hospitality industry. Beautiful wedding tents and so on were what this company did all day long. And almost overnight, the party was over for these folks. The orders went away, and they were left with, a few hundred employees that they were trying to figure out, what can we do to keep these folks busy, keep our organization as a going concern, and retain our talent. So the management team realized they need to pursue an incredibly rapid path of innovation. And although I wasn't there firsthand, I kind of imagine from my conversations that the team kind of looked through the different core elements of what they can do to add value almost instantaneously to markets that are in need. And if you've ever tried to wonder how you can add structure to your innovation or ideation process, this Dublin model is really a great way that I would encourage you to kind of look at what you can bring to the table and add value in terms of, product configurations or offerings or even customer experiences. In the case of our friends that made party tents that were left high and dry at incredibly short notice, they realized that their cut and sew operation enabled them to have brand new product offerings that could help with the much needed social distancing requirements across the country. And within short notice, they realized that they needed to really define what those opportunities look like. So they brought their team together. They worked through, what are the areas of ideas that we can pursue and go after to be successful with marketing and sales so we can grow our top line. They zeroed in on ideas for one particular new market with a whole host of customers across the country. And through the process, they realized they had a path forward. This is something that can be replicated in any business. They realized the K through 12 market, the same market that our friends from the filing cabinet manufacturers went after and grew wildly in, was a way forward in terms of keeping students and teachers and administrators safe. Building these partitions that are clear and easily moved from one spot to another was an incredibly easy and important way to generate revenue for these manufacturers. But it was also a way to really protect students across the country and administrators as well. So this path of rapid innovation is one that I turn to and I call out because I think it was so wonderful that an organization was able to pivot so quickly. And quite frankly, I realize everyone's going to have different challenges and different opportunities. But in this case, within 10 weeks, they were able to find over $900,000 in new revenue, in that lost revenue they were able to regain. And they realized that building a network of contacts is not as hard as they thought it was. Being able to diversify is not as hard as they thought it was, particularly when they have core competencies that they could leverage and expertise that they could transfer into markets that have an active need. So we look at the next trait number 4. I would encourage you to take thoughtful actions that are measured and managed. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not really enough to think we should go this direction and it'll be all sunshine and happy days from here. We need to make sure that once we have our vision and our direction, that we have set KPIs or key performance indicators that will keep us on track and moving forward towards that growth. Looking at manufacturing as a whole, the idea of Plan, Do, Check, Act is so deep-rooted in who we are and what we do and how we work as manufacturers. But honestly, it works the same in a growth strategy, the same as it would work in an operation. You want to have goals that are specific, that are measurable, that are attainable and relevant. You want them to be time-based so that when you start to build teams and align yourself around, where to go and how to measure success, everybody understands where you are at any given point in time. And having these SMART goals, especially if you're on the smaller side of being a business, they help you punch above your fighting weight. If you're a manufacturer, if you're a contract manufacturer, and you're trying to find out, what can we do better or how can we be positioned different, having SMART goals that align around your strengths as an organization and set-asides that'll put you on a path towards selling into and marketing to very carefully identified target audiences, that's going to be so important. So having your SMART goals and then trying to actually implement these goals with a set structure and set rigor is going to be very important. We can talk today a little bit about how this has worked in terms of building SMART goals around lead generation in particular, because I know in our travels we find many small manufacturers and even some larger ones alike struggle to put structure around how they go out and target new opportunities. And I'll let my colleague Sylvia walk us through what kind of structure we were able to plug into a contract manufacturer that happened to make high-end rubber parts outside of northwestern Pennsylvania. And they were one of those players that were aging out of some automotive platforms that they were having a hard time to replace. So the name of the game really came down to market diversification and trying something new with their lead generation process. Sylvia?
Thank you. So the first thing what we wanted to do is to develop a sales structure to secure some opportunities in new market segments, knowing that current segments, as Chris mentioned, are stagnating. So helping clients with lead generation and market scouting, it's a major aspect of what we normally do. We knew that for any growth initiative to work, we need structure and goals. So we met with the management and we've established, as Chris had mentioned, a PDCA, which is Plan, Do, Check, Act structure. We've set SMART goals and measures of success that we then went on to reviewing on bi-weekly basis. So as you can see, we've went after a set structure in place. Okay. If you are a business that is looking to grow and improve, your pipeline requires some form of steps to follow. So as I've mentioned, we worked with the management to set revenue goals overall by product category, by team member. We set the goals for the good of the company, looking at the healthiest margins, but also taking into consideration the market need. When we've had the goals, we wanted to make sure that we have a clear roles and responsibilities that are communicated to the team. Any timelines, any processes, we wanted to make sure that they have clear buy-in from the team and follow the SMART goals. Once we had all that done, we've built a timeline with a clear path of implementation and a standard review process that we knew it needs to take place for things to work well. Establishing standard work for data entry, lead nurturing, with structured timeline windows, we knew that will bring transparency and ease of sales management. At the end, we pointed to the client that it's very important not to assume that things will be working. So we established a firm tracking systems in place, standard check-ins that were essential to manage quality and the teams and process performance. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Sylvia. So here we were able to take a contract manufacturer that was used to dealing in automotive industry and really put them on a path towards very thoughtful diversification. One of the things that I look back and really passionately believe was most impactful was the structure and the cadence towards targeting new markets and going after new sales opportunities. In this case, throughout the course of a couple years that we've been trying to build this process, I will say that they were able to identify over $1.5 million in new and diversified sales. So they were able to really get away from, the cyclical burdens of the automotive industry and go out and diversify into new markets that had really diverse needs. And if you find yourself in cyclical markets or having too many eggs in one basket, applying a structured process with those SMART goals and PDCA kind of thinking behind it can certainly put you on a fast track towards market diversification. And that leads us into the next and fifth element of building a resilient growth strategy. This element has to do with connecting yourself or your individuals in the organization with opportunities that are out there around you. And it's very similar to our friends with the contract rubber manufacturing business. In this case, we were working with a metal fabricator, a machine shop, if you will, in a rural part of Pennsylvania. And they were really unique in that they had some spec work where they were supplying some large OEMs, and they realized that it was really good work and it could be sustainable, but they didn't have a structure or process at all in place to go after and find new revenue opportunities. They believed they were out there, but like many small manufacturers, they were not efficient at building a system for growth. And, to the point around trying to take the plan, do, check, act thinking and make it work within a growth strategy, I'm a huge believer that there is just as much waste on average within the front sales pipeline as there is in any plant operation. So just like any good continuous improvement process, you want to have a war on waste, even in your lead generation approach. So, when you look at trying to connect yourself with the opportunities that are around you, consider, the equivalent of a value stream mapping exercise where you're really trying to eliminate waste and put yourself on a path forward that's going to be meaningful and effective. Again, this is one of the things that I would call out in the workbook, take some time and get familiar with. But there's so much to be said for the role of market segmentation, targeting, and positioning when you go out and decide it's time to communicate and pursue new markets and new audiences, especially as a manufacturer. Think about the NAICS or the SIC codes, the market segments and classifications that you currently service and where you add value. Go a step further and start to identify the individuals within those businesses, within those markets that you work with and who hold a high regard for your business, and start to kind of envision what messages they respond to well, right? So it's all a game of really connecting the dots. If we're going to look at the markets that we know we can add value in our ability to service, and the individuals within those markets that like and enjoy working with us, and the market positioning that we can take to build their trust, that's going to give us structure and it's going to give us successes as we go out and we try to expand our market penetration. So, there's a simple acronym, STP, for your industrial marketing: segment, target, and position. Find the industries where you can serve and add value. Target the individuals that would see you as a value-added resource versus the individuals that want to get, the cheapest price. and position your business as a partner, as being a distinct supply chain element that is all but irreplaceable. When you do that, you'll find success will follow shortly. In the case of our contract manufacturer, our machine shop, if you will, using this market segmentation and trying to really take the unique step of mining a family tree, if you will, we were able to go after their one division of Lockheed Martin that they were selling brackets into and find other divisions throughout the country where we were able to take this small, $2.5–3 million machine shop and literally double their sales within that 2-year period of time just by finding other divisions of Lockheed that they were able to service, being that they were an approved vendor. So, there's a lot of different ways you can approach your STP, your segmentation, your targeting, and your positioning. But you want to start with the ones that will give you the path of least resistance so that you can, again, live by that adage that success breeds success. Now, I know, Sylvia, you were an active part of this project, and your team really considers it a big win.
Sure.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Absolutely. I mean, this was an example where the client, as you've mentioned, really leveraged their approval vendor with Lockheed Martin and went on knocking on doors of other suitable divisions throughout the family tree and successfully was able to secure multi-million jobs for the organization. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Sylvia. So moving right along, the next example that we pulled as a trait of resiliency is to really be able to adapt quickly to changing conditions. This is almost the first cousin of situational awareness. But the story that we kind of highlighted today has to do with a client that did their job too well in many regards. They were supplying specific materials into pharmaceutical manufacturing, and they were doing so as a reseller. They created too much market demand and were too good, and ultimately their supplier decided to go direct. That left, as you can imagine, a pretty significant hole in their backlog. And it created a degree of urgency to figure out, how can we fill that hole? The path forward in this regard had a lot to do with what we refer to as market scouting. And this is really the process, to simplify it down to an extreme degree, of testing a hypothesis, right? So what you want to do when you're faced with such adversity and you want to try to validate, the best way forward, construct a hypothesis that you think is going to lead you out of your struggle. Run it by people within the target industries. Consider it almost primary research or person-to-person interviews to see if there would be a demand. Start to record and track your data, both quantitative and qualitative, so you can start to decide, is this the way to go for us as an organization? And then share your insights with the people that are going to help you in the decision-making process so that you can get to a go or no-go decision when you really need to prioritize, the utilization of limited bandwidth or even cash resources. So market scouting is a quick way of testing a growth hypothesis. Should we go in this market and try to sell someone, a purple and pink widget versus a green square? Having this kind of rapid-fire approach to test an idea is something that we see time in and time out work. Market scouting can be as simple as developing your hypotheses and getting that idea in front of people you believe would benefit from it. But it also helps get to market so much faster than building out formal and really robust marketing campaigns and strategies. You're basically testing an idea and going direct to the end users and seeing, would you buy this? And basically, if we were able to supply it to you, how soon would you write a purchase order? Now, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I do want to say that it is an ideal approach if you're in any one of these situations. Market scouting is great to explore if you feel like you have too many eggs in one basket, too much is riding on one key account. Your current market is offering limited growth. I mean, right now we could have picked 5 different examples of operations that were too heavily loaded into commercial aerospace or travel and leisure. We need to find so many different ways out of those opportunities, and market scouting has been a huge, huge way to help manufacturers deal with those areas of adversity. It's also a great way forward if you feel like your existing core competencies would be ideally suited to different markets that you're not familiar with. And in other areas, maybe you have someone in your organization that's got an idea that's really inspirational or they're really passionate about. Test it and see if it works. It could be your next big revenue stream. And then lastly, when you think about marketing and market scouting, if you find yourself with kind of a unique project that's come through your doors and it feels like it's right, it feels like you can make good money and there's a good margin on the work you're doing, test it out. See if you can go further into those areas of opportunity. That's where market scouting can really add value. Now, as we wind down with the final of our 7 traits towards a resilient growth strategy, I would encourage everyone to think about the last one and really try to absorb it. A resilient growth strategy isn't just about, bringing new orders in the door, but a resilient growth strategy should, at its core, be about energizing the people that get up and do their best on a daily basis to make your business so vibrant and such a important part of our nation's manufacturing economy. If I were to look back at the 6 companies that we kind of took a quick tour through this afternoon, I can tell you this, and I can promise you this: each one of these companies succeeded not just in their top-line growth and driving up margins in really unique areas of opportunity, but each one of these companies, as a culture, are so much better today than they were when they began their journey towards top-line growth. I said it a couple times, and I did so intentionally through this conversation. Success breeds success. And it's not just about the bottom line. It's about people within your organization just loving what they do and seeing that their employer is progressive, it's responsive, it's fresh. I mean, the energy that is created when you pursue this path of continuous improvement, continuous innovation, it's contagious, and it will make you a very desirable place to work, and growth will sustain itself. I can't speak enough of just the impact that a resilient, energized workplace can have in the role of American manufacturing. And that leads me to, my final comment as regards to the 7 traits that we've walked through today. The whole role of being a resilient entity should not just sit on one person. It's not just the job of the CEO or the head of operations. Your culture should be one of resilience. Your culture should be one of problem solving. When you have that, that's when tremendous, rapid growth can occur. And we covered a lot of different tools. And as I mentioned, we even put together a whole workbook to kind of help you navigate through these tools. But what I will tell you, there's probably one tool when you go through and you kind of look at the workbook and where you might be able to kind of get started. There's going to be one tool that's going to be very relatable to you, whether it's market scouting or voice of customer research. There's going to be one place where you look at and you start to read through and decide that's where we should start. And I can tell you with a high degree of confidence that's the right place to begin because it's right for you. It's that low-lying fruit that you can understand, you can get behind, and you can start moving the ball forward. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go through and pursue top-line growth. You need to find the one that you're most comfortable with as an organization and get started on your journey. And as I conclude, I want to share with you that you're not alone in this journey. You don't have to be alone. You have the National Network at your fingertips. There's an MEP Center, Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center, within a 2 hours drive of every business across the country. There's probably one a lot closer than that 2 hours drive. But what I'm trying to get at is there's a network of over 2,000 folks that are available to help you solve your problems, to make it so that you can move forward faster as a manufacturing company. We've been around in most areas for over 30 years, and we're committed to advancing manufacturing excellence and growth. So if you have any questions or you want to learn more about some of these best practices that are out there for manufacturers, from strategy and operations through to technology and top-line growth, let your MEP partner be a resource that can help you find how to move forward faster. And there's a lot of different ways that we can connect, but the one I would recommend is that you spend a moment and get familiar with the NIST page that covers the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. For those of you in the audience that might not be really familiar with kind of how the MEP network works, we are under the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, and there's a center across every state that's in place to help manufacturers. So take some time, get to learn about your MEP network, hopefully get to engage with the MEP network. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over back to Jill so we can run through any questions that might be running through the audience as a result of what we talked about today.
Okay, tremendous. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. And a few of you have already submitted questions, so we are going to jump right in and get to those. If you have a question and you have not asked it yet, now is the time to do so, and we will do our best to sneak it in. I also am going to ask that while our presenters are answering your questions, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that is on the left side of the lower toolbar. Okay, and with that, our first question is there a rule of thumb that you have seen with regards to sale and marketing budgets for manufacturers?
Thank you, Jill. We get asked that quite a lot. It's something that I've been tracking for the last 10 years. In our Philadelphia market, we see the baseline set aside is 3 to 4%, and that's basically a lifeline. It's too little and it doesn't do enough to move the needle. The high flyers in terms of manufacturers that really invest wisely and experience growth, they'll invest between 8 to 12% of their revenues, their total revenues, back into marketing and sales, whether it's the employment of their sales team and their marketing budget, trade shows, the whole kind of mix would be that 8 to 12% from your staff, your marketing, your sales staff, through to your marketing budget. But that is kind of the number that really triggers and helps accelerate growth that we've seen, and that's what we tend to advise.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, if you are a business, looking to pursue new products or just growth in general, where is the best place to start the process?
There's a lot of different ways you can start to trigger, a growth strategy or just even pursue, market diversification. But the one I believe is easiest for most to absorb, and it's got the most benefits overall to the organization, is a simple voice of customer survey. Targeting your current customers and seeing what's in their next generation of product or pipeline development, targeting your lost customers and understanding what went wrong or how you might be able to get back into their inner workings, and then certainly trying to reach out to those prospects that you quoted and didn't really get anywhere with, and understand why. All of that's grounds for continuous improvement, and more often than not, when we see businesses take the time to go through that voice of customer, they're finding new jobs almost instantaneously as a result of just asking, what's next and how can we help?
Okay, we have another question here. And the question is, what organization are the presenters from? I don't recognize the acronym DVIRC, so if you can kind of reintroduce yourself and your organization, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you. We are with an organization called the Delaware Valley Industrial Resource Center. DVIRC.org is our website, www.dvirc.org. And we are the Philadelphia-based center for the Pennsylvania MEP, Pennsylvania Manufacturing Extension Partnership.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Our next question comes from Roy, who asks, how does the unique value proposition relate to the business case and the strategy of the company?
So the unique value proposition is, it's your frontline message. It's your elevator pitch. It's what you use to express who you are and how you add value to the customers you serve. It needs to be genuine, it needs to be sincere, and it needs to be precise with, how you can provide a solution that someone else is the same solution someone else is trying to offer. So it's got to be compelling. In terms of how that syncs up with a corporate strategy, if your strategy is based on leveraging your core competencies as a business, based on leveraging what you believe you do better than your market rivals, your value proposition needs to reflect that. And we are big believers in that value proposition should be adapted to the industries that you're servicing. So, for instance, if you're going after defense markets, healthcare markets, and food manufacturing, you want iterations of your value proposition to be relative to those specific industries. So it's not this kind of generic one-size-fits-all tagline. We want the value proposition to kind of be a living narrative of how you solve problems in the specific industries that you're targeting. And again, that should be those target markets should be very carefully outlined within that growth strategy, so that it's all part of a closed loop effort, and ultimately that can help even drive the branding of an organization and so on.
Okay, thank you. This may be our last question. And the question is there a typical timeline for businesses to turn around their top-line issues?
There's not a typical timeline, just given the diversity of sales cycles in manufacturing. I think you can start to feel energy if you're very careful and you follow that process that Sylvia kind of walked us through in terms of lead generation. You'll see an impact within the first quarter to 6 months, by all means, if you haven't really pursued any kind of lead generation efforts. You can start to feel momentum within 6 months. What we've seen in terms of really gainful growth and advancement, 12 to 18 months, you'll start to feel, if you're consistent and dedicated to these changes, you'll start to see gainful growth. And then by that second to third year, it just becomes part of the organization's DNA, and that's where you can really get into the fast track of meaningful revenue generation improvements on a sustained basis.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have, unfortunately, reached the top of the hour, so we are out of time. I would like to take a moment to thank our speakers, Chris Scafario and Sylvia, and of course our sponsor, the MEP National Network. And most of all, we'd like to thank you, our audience, for your kind attention this afternoon. And with that, on behalf of Industry Week, please have a productive remainder of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.